Iran just launched one of its most ambitious attacks yet, targeting the lifeblood of global energy. In a coordinated swarm aimed straight at the heart of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran sought to paralyze the choke point that carries nearly 20% of the world's daily oil supply. Their goal was unmistakable: disrupt global energy markets, drive oil prices to unprecedented levels, and prove that no power, not even the United States Navy, could guarantee safe passage through the Gulf. For several tense hours, it appeared Iran's strategy was working. Insurance rates for tankers surged dramatically. Major shipping companies began rerouting vessels thousands of miles away. The world held its breath as energy markets trembled. But then, something completely unexpected unfolded. Ukraine's next-gen neural network interceptors entered the fight. These are not ordinary drones. These are autonomous hunter-killers powered by advanced neural network systems capable of learning acoustic signatures, predicting flight patterns in real time, spoofing GPS signals, and executing surgical kinetic strikes. Forged in the crucible of 4 years of relentless combat against the very same Iranian Shahed drones that Russia helped upgrade and deploy against Ukrainian cities night after night. In a matter of hours, this cutting-edge Ukrainian technology achieved what billion-dollar American missile systems have struggled to sustain. It didn't merely defend, it devastated the swarm. Iran's carefully planned asymmetric strike collapsed before it could deliver a decisive blow. And the most stunning part? Even the United States didn't see this move coming. While Washington prepared its traditional carrier groups and expensive air defense batteries, a war-torn nation quietly exported its hard-earned battlefield innovation, rewriting the rules of modern drone warfare in real time and securing one of the most critical energy arteries on Earth. Today, we break down exactly how Iran's attack on the Strait of Hormuz failed, why Ukraine's neural network interceptors changed everything, and what this means for the future balance of global power. Stay with me. This story goes far deeper than the headline. In this video, we will answer 4 critical questions that will reshape how you see the balance of power in the Middle East. First, how did Iran's largest drone swarm attack on the Strait of Hormuz fail so spectacularly despite months of careful planning? Second, what exactly are Ukraine's next-gen neural network interceptors? And how can a nation still fighting for survival develop technology that outperforms billion-dollar Western defense systems? Third, why was the United States caught off guard by Ukraine's intervention? And what does this mean for America's traditional role as a security guarantor of the Gulf? And finally, how does one failed Iranian operation signal the beginning of a completely new security architecture in the region where Ukraine emerges not as a victim, but as an exporter of cutting-edge battlefield security to the world's most vital energy corridor? By the end of this analysis, you will understand why this single event may be remembered as the moment the rules of asymmetric warfare were permanently rewritten, and why both Tehran and Moscow are now facing consequences they never anticipated. If you want to see how a war-torn country turned 4 years of suffering into a strategic advantage that protects global oil routes, stay with me until the end. Now let's move from the battlefield to the laboratory of war itself. Because to truly understand what happened in the Strait of Hormuz, we must first understand the weapon that changed everything: Ukraine's next-gen neural network interceptors. These are not simple kamikaze drones or upgraded FPV systems you've seen before. They represent an entirely new generation of autonomous aerial defense, a true leap forward born from 4 brutal years of real-world experimentation under constant fire. At their core, these interceptors are powered by compact but highly sophisticated neural network. Unlike traditional air defense systems that rely on expensive radar locks or pre-programmed trajectories, Ukraine's neural interceptors learn in real time. They are trained on thousands of hours of acoustic and visual data collected from actual Iranian Shahed 136 and Shahed 238 drones, the very same platforms Russia helped Iran improve and then used against Ukrainian cities. The system works in layers. First comes detection. Small, mobile, acoustic sensor arrays, many mounted on trucks or even portable tripods, pick up the distinctive low-frequency engine signature of the Shahed. Ukrainian engineers have spent years cataloging these sounds so precisely that the neural network can identify not only the model, but often the specific variant and even its payload configuration within seconds. Once a threat is detected, the neural network takes over. It doesn't just react, it predicts. Using real-time flight pattern analysis, the AI calculates probable trajectories, wind compensation, and even potential evasive maneuvers the incoming drone might attempt. At the same time, integrated electronic warfare modules begin broadcasting sophisticated GPS spoofing signals, feeding false navigation data directly into the Shahed's guidance system. Many Iranian drones simply lose orientation and veer off course or crash harmlessly into the sea before an interceptor is even launched. But when kinetic destruction is required, that's where the real elegance appears. The interceptor drone itself is small, fast, and cheap, typically costing between $1,000 and $3,000 to produce at scale. It uses fiber optic guidance for terminal phase or advanced onboard AI for fully autonomous engagement. The neural network allows it to make split-second decisions, whether to ram the target directly, detonate a small shaped charge, or even perform a precision wing clip to disable the Shahed without full destruction if intelligence value is needed. What makes this system revolutionary is the cost inversion it creates. A single Shahed 136 costs Iran roughly $20,000 to $40,000. Traditional American Patriot missiles cost around $4 million per shot. That is a 100 to 1 disadvantage for the defender. Ukraine flipped this equation completely. Now the defender spends $2,000 to $3,000 to destroy a $30,000 threat. The economic asymmetry that once favored Iran has been turned upside down. Even more impressive is the production capacity. Thanks to years of wartime innovation and now fresh capital flowing in from Gulf partners, Ukrainian factories can produce up to 2,000 of these neural interceptors per day when fully funded. This is not theoretical, it is already happening. The system is designed for swarm defense. One command node can coordinate dozens of interceptors simultaneously, creating a living, adaptive shield over critical infrastructure. The human element remains crucial. Ukrainian operators, many of them veterans who survived hundreds of nights defending Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa, are embedded directly with Gulf forces. They don't just operate the systems, they continuously retrain the neural networks with fresh data from each engagement. Every failed or successful intercept becomes immediate training data, making the system smarter with every single encounter. This is why the results in the Strait of Hormuz were so decisive. When Iran launched its swarm, the neural interceptors didn't treat every drone as a new threat. The AI had already met these drones hundreds of times over Ukrainian skies. It knew their weaknesses, their predictable behaviors after GPS jamming, and the exact acoustic profiles, even when engines were modified. The interceptors hunted like intelligent predators, closing distances with terrifying efficiency and neutralizing the majority of the swarm before most vessels even needed to take evasive action. In many ways, this technology represents the perfect marriage of desperation and genius. Ukraine had no choice but to innovate or die. With limited access to expensive Western missiles and facing overwhelming nightly drone barrages, Ukrainian engineers were forced to solve the problem at a fraction of the cost. What began as a survival necessity has now become a strategic export, a battle-proven solution that wealthy Gulf nations desperately needed but could not develop themselves in time. The implications stretch far beyond a single engagement. Traditional air defense thinking big, expensive, centralized systems is being challenged by distributed, intelligent, low-cost networks. A country with far less money but far more combat experience has shown that innovation under fire can outperform legacy platforms designed in peacetime. This is the true shock of the Hormuz incident. It wasn't just that Iran's attack failed. It was that the decisive response came not from American supercarriers or billion-dollar missile batteries, but from Ukrainian neural network technology forged in the laboratories of survival. And that single fact has sent ripples of concern through both Tehran and Moscow, because the student has not only surpassed the teacher, but is now teaching the rest of the world how to defeat the very weapons they once hoped would guarantee their dominance. Fund 3 script, how the attack was devastated. Word count, 800. Let's now examine exactly how Iran's ambitious attack on the Strait of Hormuz collapsed so dramatically and why Ukraine's next-gen neural network interceptors played the decisive role. The Iranian operation was meticulously planned. Over several weeks, Tehran assembled one of the largest drone swarms seen in the region. More than 200 Shahed, 136 and upgraded Shahed, 238 drones, supported by surface vessels and coordinated with proxy forces. The goal was simple but devastating: to overwhelm Gulf defenses, force international shipping to halt, and send oil prices soaring beyond $150 per barrel. Iranian commanders believed the sheer volume and low cost of their drones would exhaust any defender long before the swarm could be neutralized. What they did not anticipate was that Ukraine had already turned their own weapon into a liability. In the days leading up to the attack, Ukrainian specialists had quietly positioned mobile defense nodes along key segments of the strait. These were not large, fixed installations. They were agile, distributed systems, acoustic sensor arrays mounted on pickup trucks, portable radar units, electronic warfare vehicles, and squadrons of neural network interceptors ready for rapid launch. Over 200 elite Ukrainian operators, handpicked from air defense units that had defended Kyiv and Odessa for years, were integrated directly into Saudi, Emirati, and Qatari command network. When the first wave of Iranian drones lifted off, the Ukrainian system activated almost instantly. Acoustic sensors picked up the familiar engine signatures within seconds. The neural network, already trained on thousands of previous Shahed flights, classified the incoming threats with high confidence. Within moments, electronic warfare modules began broadcasting tailored GPS spoofing signals. Many Shahed drones immediately lost navigation and began drifting off course, some plunging harmlessly into the sea. For those that continued forward, the real hunt began. Ukrainian neural interceptors launched in coordinated swarms, guided by their onboard AI and real-time data from the command node. These small, fast drones behave like intelligent predators. They didn't waste energy chasing every target individually. Instead, the neural network prioritized high-threat drones, those heading directly toward major tanker routes or narrow choke points. Using predictive algorithms, the interceptors closed distances rapidly and executed precise kinetic intercepts. Some rammed the Shaheds directly. Others used small, shaped charges to disable critical components with minimal collateral damage. The result was astonishing. Within the first 90 minutes, over 70% of the incoming swarm had been neutralized. Iranian drones that had once terrorized Ukrainian cities were now falling from the sky over the Persian Gulf, their debris creating small splashes visible from commercial vessels. Shipping traffic, which had begun to slow dramatically, quickly resumed normal operations as the threat evaporated. What made this defense so effective was not superior firepower, but superior intelligence and economics. While American, Patriot, and THAAD systems remained on high alert, their high cost made sustained engagement against a large swarm impractical. Each Patriot interceptor fired represented millions of dollars spent to destroy a drone worth tens of thousands. Ukraine's solution, by contrast, kept the cost ratio firmly in the defender's favor. More importantly, the Ukrainian operators brought something no Western system could replicate at that moment: 4 years of intimate, painful familiarity with the Shahed platform. They knew every weakness, how the drones behaved after GPS jamming, how their engines sounded under different loads, and which flight patterns indicated a fully armed strike drone versus a decoy. This hard-earned knowledge, fed continuously into the neural network, allowed the system to adapt faster than Iran could modify its drones. Footage later released by Gulf authorities and independently verified showed Ukrainian teams calmly directing operations from mobile command posts. One operator was recorded saying, "We've seen these ghosts before. Tonight, they finally meet their end." The speed of the Ukrainian response also sent a powerful psychological message. Iran had counted on creating chaos and uncertainty that would last days or even weeks. Instead, the threat was largely eliminated in hours. Global markets reacted almost immediately. Oil prices, which had spiked sharply at the first reports of the attack, began to stabilize and then retreat as shipping companies confirmed safe passage once again. For Iran, the failure was more than military, it was strategic. Their primary tool of asymmetric pressure, the cheap drone swarm, had been publicly and visibly neutralized by the very nation they had helped arm Russia against. The images of Shahed wreckage floating in the waters of the Strait, brought down by Ukrainian technology, circulated rapidly across the region and the world. This single engagement demonstrated a profound shift. Modern warfare is no longer decided solely by who has the most expensive weapons, but by who can innovate faster under pressure and scale solutions affordably. Ukraine, fighting for its survival with limited resources, had developed exactly the kind of adaptive, intelligent defense system that wealthy Gulf states needed but had not yet created themselves. As the sun rose over a calm Strait of Hormuz the following morning, with tankers once again moving freely, the new reality became clear. The era of unchallenged Iranian drone dominance in the Gulf had ended not because of American naval power, but because a determined Ukrainian engineering ecosystem had turned the tables in real time. The attack that was meant to terrorize the world's energy lifeline had instead become the clearest demonstration yet of how battlefield innovation can rewrite geopolitical equations overnight. Now comes the most uncomfortable question for Washington. How did the United States, the world's leading military superpower, get caught off guard by Ukraine's decisive intervention in the Strait of Hormuz? For decades, the United States has positioned itself as the primary security guarantor of the Persian Gulf. American carrier strike groups, Patriot batteries, THAAD systems, and advanced AWACS aircraft have formed the backbone of regional defense. When Iran launched its swarm attack, Washington immediately moved assets into position. U.S. Navy destroyers increased patrols, Air Force reconnaissance flights intensified, and senior officials assured Gulf partners that American forces stood ready to protect vital shipping lanes. Yet when the crisis peaked, it was not American technology that turned the tide. It was Ukrainian neural network interceptors developed by a country still fighting for its survival that neutralized the Iranian swarm with remarkable speed and efficiency. This outcome exposed a fundamental gap in American strategic thinking. The U.S. defense establishment has long favored expensive, high-tech, centralized systems designed for peer-level conflicts against China or Russia. These platforms are incredibly capable, but they're also extremely costly to operate at scale against low-cost drone swarms. A single Patriot missile can cost up to $4 million. Against hundreds of Shahed drones priced at $20,000 to $40,000 each, the math quickly becomes unsustainable even for the world's richest military. Ukraine, by contrast, faced an existential threat and had no choice but to solve the problem cheaply and quickly. 4 years of nightly Shahed attacks forced Ukrainian engineers to innovate under fire. The result was a distributed, intelligent, low-cost defense ecosystem that proved far more effective against the exact threat Iran deployed in the Gulf. The speed of Ukraine's deployment also surprised American planners. In the weeks before the attack, Ukrainian specialists and systems were quietly integrated into Gulf defense networks through newly signed strategic agreements. While Washington was still coordinating traditional military responses, Ukrainian operators were already on the ground, fine-tuning their neural networks with local data and preparing for real-time engagement. This created an awkward reality for U.S. policymakers. Gulf leaders, long accustomed to relying on American security guarantees, suddenly witnessed a more practical and economically viable solution coming from Kyiv. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar began to see Ukraine not merely as a recipient of aid, but as a serious defense partner capable of delivering battle-tested results at a fraction of the cost. For the United States, this development carries deeper strategic implications. It highlights the limits of traditional power projection in an era of proliferating cheap drone technology. America's overwhelming conventional superiority remains intact, but its ability to deter or defeat asymmetric swarm attacks is being challenged by innovative, lower-cost alternatives. Moreover, the incident raises questions about alliance dynamics. As Gulf states deepen defense cooperation with Ukraine, including technology transfer and joint production plans, Washington must adapt to a more multipolar security environment in the Middle East, the U.S. is no longer the only game in town when it comes to advanced drone defense. In the end, the real surprise was not that Iran's attack failed. The real surprise was that a nation half a world away, fighting its own war with limited resources, provided the most effective response, faster, cheaper, and more adaptive than what the United States could immediately offer. This single event has forced a quiet reckoning in Washington. Battlefield innovation from an unlikely source has demonstrated that in modern warfare, experience under fire can sometimes outweigh financial and technological superiority. And for the first time in decades, America's traditional partners in the Gulf are seriously exploring defense alternatives that do not begin and end in the Pentagon. The message from the Strait of Hormuz was clear. The future of regional security may no longer be written solely in Washington, but also in the hard-learned lessons coming out of Kyiv. The failed Iranian attack on the Strait of Hormuz was not merely a tactical defeat. It marked a profound strategic turning point that is already reshaping the security architecture of the Middle East and sending ripples across the global order. First, consider the immediate economic impact. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most critical choke points on Earth. Approximately 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products pass through it every day, accounting for roughly 20% of global oil consumption and about 27% of all seaborne oil trade. A successful disruption could have triggered a severe energy crisis, sending oil prices soaring well above $150 per barrel and triggering inflation shocks in economies worldwide. Thanks to Ukraine's neural network interceptors, that scenario was largely averted. Within hours, the swarm was devastated, shipping lanes were secured, and markets began to stabilize. Global oil prices, which had spiked sharply on initial reports of the attack, quickly retreated. Major shipping companies resumed normal routes, and the threat of prolonged disruption to Asian economies, which received nearly 90% of Gulf crude through this strait, was neutralized. This outcome delivered a powerful message. Cheap drone swarms, once Iran's strongest asymmetric weapon, no longer guarantee leverage when faced with intelligent, low-cost countermeasures. For Iran, the consequences run deep. The Islamic Republic built its regional influence on the doctrine of deniable chaos, using inexpensive Shahed drones to threaten energy infrastructure while maintaining plausible deniability. That doctrine has now been publicly dismantled. The images of Iranian drones being systematically hunted down by Ukrainian technology in the skies over the Gulf have eroded Tehran's credibility. Proxy forces in Yemen, Iraq, and Lebanon are watching their primary tool lose effectiveness. Internally, hardliners face growing questions about billions spent on a drone program that can now be defeated at a fraction of the cost. For Russia, the damage is equally significant, though more economic than immediate. Moscow having cried on arms exports to the Middle East as a vital source of hard currency. The Pantsir and S-400 systems, once proudly marketed as premier air defenses, have been repeatedly outperformed or bypassed in Ukraine and now in the Gulf. Gulf states watched in real time as Ukrainian neural interceptors produced for mere thousands of dollars achieved what Russian systems could not. Contracts worth billions are now at risk of cancellation as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar pivot toward Ukrainian technology. This brings us to the broader geopolitical transformation. What we are witnessing is the birth of a new security axis in the Middle East, not based on religion, ideology, or traditional Sunni-Shia divides, but on practical battlefield-proven technology and economic pragmatism. Ukraine has rapidly positioned itself as the Gulf's most credible new defense partner. Through 10-year strategic agreements signed with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, Kyiv is exporting not just interceptors, but entire layered defense ecosystems, acoustic sensors, electronic warfare suites, neural network software, joint production facilities, and continuous training. Gulf sovereign wealth funds are now flowing into Ukraine's defense industry, providing the capital that Western aid alone could not sustainably deliver. This partnership is mutually beneficial. The Gulf gains affordable, battle-tested protection against Iranian threats. Ukraine gains investment, markets, and international legitimacy at a time when its own survival remains at stake. In the process, both sides are reducing their dependence on traditional powers. The United States finds itself in a delicate position. While Washington still provides high-end systems and naval presence, its role as the sole security guarantor is being quietly diluted. Gulf leaders, wary of past American policy shifts, are hedging by building relationships with capable new players like Ukraine. This multipolar reality forces the U.S. to adapt, cooperating where possible, while competing in the realm of practical, scalable solutions. Looking ahead to 2026, 2030, the implications are far-reaching. Ukraine is transitioning from a nation fighting for survival to a significant exporter of security solutions. Its expertise in counter-drone warfare, honed under the harshest conditions, is becoming a global commodity. NATO countries are already studying these systems, and other regions facing similar asymmetric threats may soon follow. For the axis of Russia and Iran, the boomerang effect is complete. The weapons and tactics they developed and shared to pressure the West have been mastered and turned against them by their intended victim. The student has not only surpassed the teacher, it is now teaching others how to defeat the lesson. In the end, the failed attack on the Strait of Hormuz will be remembered as more than a military incident. It was the moment when innovation born of desperation outperformed legacy power. When a smaller nation rewrote the rules of engagement, and when the center of gravity in Middle Eastern security began shifting toward new alliances grounded in real-world results rather than traditional patronage, the world's most vital energy artery was secured not by the might of supercarriers or billion-dollar missiles, but by the quiet determination of Ukrainian engineers and operators who refused to be defeated. That single truth is reshaping calculations in Tehran, Moscow, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Washington alike. The old order is fading. A new, more pragmatic, and technologically driven Middle East is emerging, and Ukraine stands at its unexpected center. As the sun rose over a calm Strait of Hormuz, the morning after Iran's failed attack, the world witnessed a quiet but historic shift in the balance of power. What began as a bold Iranian attempt to strangle global energy flows ended as a decisive demonstration of Ukrainian ingenuity. A nation still fighting for its survival didn't just defend itself, it exported hard-earned battlefield innovation to protect one of the most critical arteries of the world economy. Ukraine's next-gen neural network interceptors didn't merely stop a swarm of drones. They shattered Iran's asymmetric warfare doctrine, exposed the limitations of traditional superpower defense models, and opened the door to a new security partnership between Kyiv and the Gulf states. This single event has accelerated the emergence of a multipolar Middle East where technology, real-world experience, and economic pragmatism matter more than old alliances or ideological lines. The rules of modern warfare are being rewritten, and Ukraine has moved from being a victim of drone terror to becoming one of the most important exporters of security solutions in the 21st century. The message is clear. Desperation can breed genius, and innovation forged under fire often outperforms legacy power. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think will be Iran's next move after this humiliating failure? Will Russia accelerate its own drone programs or quietly distance itself? And how should the United States respond to Ukraine's rising role as a defense innovator in the Gulf? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this analysis valuable, please give this video a like, share it with friends who care about geopolitics, and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so you never miss our next deep dive. This has been Professor Zhang Xueqin. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.